welcome to another episode of Coast Connections. It's our pleasure to take you to a hidden gem, a little kingdom on Hornby Island, just off the coast of Vancouver Island here in Canada. And it's a sculpture park. And they say that sculpture is a bit like archaeology. You have to really dig in to find something. Well, we have found you, not something, we found you 100 really good reasons to go and visit this park. And joining me today is the curator of the park. Welcome, Mr. Karun Koernig.
Thank you.
Nice to have you. Thank you, Karun, for coming all the way in today to join us on set. The Jeffrey Rubinoff Sculpture Park. Who knew? I've lived on the island for like 30 years. I had no idea that this gem was over there on Hornby Island.
I think that was a little bit by design. Jeffrey was a bit of a recluse. He often would say, I haven't left the property for months. So I don't think that he particularly thought of the place as an exhibit space while he was alive. But his legacy certainly speaks to the fact that he wanted everybody to come and enjoy it. So yeah, we're hoping that you can spread the word.
Absolutely. We've got some wonderful drone footage that you've provided just to give us an overview of the park. This is taken at sunset. It's on 200 hectares?
Acres.
Acres. Okay, thank you. And this drone image will give us a good sense of it if you just want to sort of talk us through this.
Well, so as you can see, the shot that's panning right now, it pans down to a large open field, which is about 50 acres. You're looking out over the Beaufort Range in the distance, Denman Island, and it's just a spectacular view at any time of day, but particularly at sunset where we've got this image here. And all of the sculptures are positioned by the artist himself. So he decided where they were going to go. He would often move them around in the pursuit of kind of the perfect angle, and most of them are made so that you can view them without too many overlaps and distractions. But and they're kind of arranged in a viewing line, so you can walk through and walk past. It is absolutely a pleasure to see them. It's almost his whole output, so you can see almost the whole life's output in one place.
Wow. And he lived to be, what, 72 years old?
Yes.
Yeah, he died quite young.
He did,
Yes.
unfortunately.
Yeah. And so almost his whole body of work here, the hundreds of sculptures,
yes, there were
are
definitely.
home there on Hornby.
Yes, there are other works that are in collections, but not that many more. So he did end up buying a couple of them back from collectors that needed to sell them, and he was happy to locate them back on the island so that we could have this very unique opportunity to see the evolution of an artist's work in one spot.
And it's all steel. Like he dealt mostly in steel. He's sort of the original man of steel.
I know. It's funny because he felt like this was an incredibly human material. So for him, the steel was a live thing. It was this amalgam, this alloy of all these different human created and mind and elements. Yeah. And so as opposed to something like stone or wood, which is actually a natural material, he felt this is a very human thing to be putting into the environment. And he was trying to get that counterpoint with the environment so that you would have a sense of the beauty of the natural space and the beauty of the humanly created object.
Wonderful. And he also said that, to enrich your soul, you need to have art. And this park is just an art piece in itself, what he's left us here.
Incredible, yeah. He landscaped it with the collaboration of a good friend of him, his friend John Kirk, over 35 years. So the planning started, decades before with the perimeter having to be bermed. So it was you would screen out all the kind of visual distractions. Trees being planted at certain heights so that you would be able to know in 20 years that they would be at a certain space, and you could have this kind of sense of being inside a bounded 360-degree exhibition space. Wow. So there's a lot of foresight and a lot of timing that had to go into that, 3 to 4 decades of landscaping.
Yeah, and he's a sculptor and a landscaper and excavator. He's like a sculptivator.
Well, he didn't operate the machines himself, but he certainly was extremely particular about the landscaping. Yeah. The 35 ponds were dug primarily for drainage, but also to provide the mounds and things that the sculptures are presented on. So, he saw the environment as a sculpture, and actually a very intimidating sculpture. All of the trees, the mountains, the lines in the distant Beaufort Range and Denman Island, he saw them as sculptural lines, as well as the trees and all the vegetation. So he said, this is a crushing environment. This isn't an easy environment. Normally artists want to put their pieces in a white cube,
Right.
not in a thing that competes with being interesting sculpture.
Yeah,
Right.
because you think of the storms too. I mean, you get 60, 80 kilometer winds out there on Hornby, and the elements and all these structures are surviving out there.
Absolutely, you have to be
Probably
part
getting
engineer.
even more beautiful with the patina changing on them.
Oh, incredibly. I mean, it's one of the most interesting things is that we have lichen growing on them. So the lichen is sort of another colonization of nature on these sculptures that he just absolutely loved. And they're the same kind of steely color as the stainless steel sculptures. So yeah, it's a wonderful coincidence that started happening.
Yeah, we have a lovely photo here of Jeffrey and standing with one of his sculptures. Tell us a little bit about this one, because it almost looks like a tail feathers of a bird or something.
This is series. It's series 8. He did call it a lot of them are named Hunter, but basically these are a celebration of the grace of sinew and bone. So the kind of sinew that you see down there, that's kind of like a representation of that. The bones are actually deer vertebrae. There's a bit of a debate. He was a resolutely abstract artist, so obviously this piece isn't about deer vertebrae. He didn't say tons about these pieces, but they're extremely graceful, and he's almost set these vertebrae sort of to flight on their sinew. So there's something about the celebration of just the beauty of the sculpting in nature that these pieces express.
Wow, and this is a relatively small one.
Yes.
And some of them are quite large. There's a couple of very larger ones that we're going to get into right now. This image here, Karun, is about 8-10 feet tall?
Yeah, at least. Yeah, definitely. It's one of the later ones. It's probably the third to last. 9.5, I believe that is. So that series, it's a very exuberant series, extremely bright and shiny. And it sort of explodes in all these various kind of V shapes that interlock. When you walk around the pieces, which is what he intended people to do, he actually designed these pieces in a 3D design software, so he would be able to rotate them at will at any angle. So you're actually meant to walk around them and, in a sense, activate all of the relationships between these elements. They're very musical, but this particular piece is probably one of his most dramatic in the last series, just a few years before he passed.
Beautiful. And the next larger one that we have here too, this beautiful sort of a copper looking one, Karun. Tell us a bit about this one.
So yes, this is a later piece in series 4, which is I would consider it magnum opus. So series 4 is the most dramatic. These pieces rise up, try to get up. They're extremely heavy. Some of them are up to 8,000 pounds and more, made of 1/2 inch to sometimes 3/4 inch steel plate. Yet they're kind of balanced on their tippy toes on these 3 points often, and are this extreme tension between lightness and not touching the ground and extreme weight. There's a lot of interior facets that are kind of dark and hidden, and so it has a sense of kind of almost knottedness. He listened to this very intense music by Bach, J.S. Bach, the Bach B minor Mass, and he would listen to that on repeat. If you know that music, you'll know that it's very intense. And the pieces really do mirror that. The sculpture before it was quite light, and it's actually the successor to that. Even though it's series 9, it's the successor series to this very angsty series 4 kind of series there.
Wow. And not all of them are huge. We have a shot of various smaller pieces. And these would be maybe, what, 2-3 feet tall?
No. He tried to stick with, it looks deceptive, he tried to stick with the height of a person. Okay. So, an adult person, so that you would encounter them at about eye level. That was quite deliberate because he said sculptors tend to want to get bigger and bigger and bigger because you've got this big creative canvas. So it's actually hard to bring them back down to human scale. So many of them are actually at human scale, or let's say adult human scale. So those ones, like you said, they're quite small. You can move them. Some of them were actually intended for sale. He wasn't an artist that started off with the ambition of making a sculpture park as a young sculptor. So some of them were meant for, putting in your apartment or something like that so that you could move them around. But the one that's in the foreground there, that's part of Series 5, which is actually directly after this very, very angsty Series 4 with the enormous heavy steel plate that you saw, the core 10 pieces. So he's going to this very playful mode in the foreground. And part of that series, which is quite interesting, is he's starting to learn how to do casting because he wants to integrate the sphere into his sculptures. So it's also another very playful aspect. And so to do that, he has to learn how to cast stainless steel. So another fascinating thing that he's learned to do by himself there on Hornby Island.
And he built his own foundry there on the property that he bought.
Incredible. When he told me that he didn't actually purchase those stainless steel spheres, he trial and error, and he learned how to do them, and he got tips. And so it was a lost foam method, and so we don't have any of the models. It's cast in sand, and we don't have any of the molds either. So none of the models or molds of any of these sculptures exist. Only the sculpture. But some of the later pieces that you'll see are the biomorphic pieces that are kind of animal-like. They're all cast. Which is a big feat. It's 3,000 degrees you have to heat the stainless steel to in order to get it to melt. So.
And he was doing this solo, wasn't he? He was very...
Well, his partner did stand there with a fire extinguisher to make sure he didn't catch on fire.
We're grateful for that.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. And just want to back up just a little bit. He was actually born in London, Ontario, and was educated in the U.S. and in Canada as well. He had a master's degree in fine arts.
Yes, he did.
How did he end up on the West Coast?
Well, that was a curious question. I mean, I think he was really looking for a piece of property that he could make sculpture on. I think he's probably looking for a bit of better weather so he could work through the winter. I know that from what he told me, he was really looking for a place that had both power and accessibility because he needed that. And the main criteria was, of course, what could it be a repository for his work? He would comment to me, I knew that the best sculptors in the world and in history, like Rodin, died with over 90% of their inventory in their inventory. So, if he were to be a sculptor, he'd need to plan right from the beginning where his pieces would land after he passed. So that was part of his planning. Why he came out west, I'm not sure, but a lot of Ontarians tend to wander out here.
Yeah. And the property that he bought was built in, I think, the late 1800s?
Even before. So the barn that's there is one of the oldest structures on the island. It was his studio. Was born, I think, 1871 or something like that. So quite a fun building to go in. It's still open for visits. Yeah. Part of his studio is preserved there, so you can see how he worked. And it was a fruit orchard. Some of the fruit trees are still there. And we actually got some visits from the family that owned it once, and they showed us some wonderful historical photos. So
wonderful.
Got a lot of history at that place.
If a person's coming to the park, how much time should they allocate? Is it like a full day you should plan on spending there?
Most people spend a couple of hours.
Yeah.
A minimum is probably about an hour. But if you want to, we're happy to take you on tour, which is about 90 minutes. But you could spend 2 or 3 hours is usually sufficient.
And we'll get into some of the events that you have there as well. Yeah. But right now, let's take a look at some of the hunter series that Jeffrey did. That first one of that bird is just gorgeous.
Yeah, and this series 7 is a bimetal series. It's Corten steel, which is it's a rusting steel that has a kind of a patina that prevents it from rusting any further. So it's kind of this self-preserving patina, which is the rusty looking part. And then there's stainless. So he's actually mixed both, cast 2 different pieces of that, and then put them together. That hunter piece is part of a grouping of very avian looking sculptures with lots of beaks and talons and feathers. And he actually once commented to me that he thought that the genetic characteristics of artists were in a large part probably going to be found to overlap with those of hunters. Our genetic history of evolution is, mainly hunter-gatherer.
Yes.
So his argument was, well, we would have needed the visual acuity to see animals moving, to pick out plants, to pick things out in the visual environment, and that would have made for great artists as well. So his identity as an artist really overlapped with his identity as a hunter as well. And I kind of feel like some of this series, with all the acute angles and the acute points, kind of point to that visual acuity needed.
All of these in this series, we've got. Then the ones that are more coppery looking.
Exactly.
A little bit different, almost. I think you mentioned fossil kind of effect there.
So he's got 36 pieces in Series 6, which is one of the only series that are have a kind of a direct message about nature and evolution. He was really interested to try and find a narrative that we could all share in, and for him that was evolution. He thought, we are part of natural history. We're one of the products of the evolution of life on this planet. Yes. And so what better way to celebrate that than to go back to when animals were first starting to be sculpted by nature. And so it's like the sculpture going back and kind of celebrating the first sculptures. The fossils that he's referring to here are the fossils of the Burgess Shale, which was actually a find in Yoho National Park in BC many years ago, and they were digging and they found this stratum of fossils that they couldn't kind of allocate to any existing class of animals at the time. So they tried to shoehorn them in, and there was this big kind of debate about what these animals were, because they didn't fit anywhere, and they were very wild animals. Like, they didn't look like anything, but they were cool sculptures.
Yes.
So he thought, well, this is actually the beginning of sculpture, really. This is art history should really start with these sculptures. So now he's bringing them back to life and making this statement that properly art history starts 500 million years ago with the Cambrian explosion and the Burgess Shale.
That is so interesting to me, Karun, because these particular ones look like cave art, and that's sort of what the early man would have.
He would have loved you saying that. He was a big fan of cave art because he felt like the hunter-gatherers would have had to spiritually fuse with their prey. They needed to understand them at a very deep level in order to be able to predict where their movements were. Those animals could kill them. So they were not just only hunters, they were at danger as well. So those cave paintings, in his estimation, were a way of communing, a way of passing perhaps knowledge to other community members about the nature of those animals.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And how tall would some of these be?
Oh, they're again at about 6 feet, head height. So you encounter the sort of the head part of the sculpture, and then the legs, so to speak, are a reference to the arthropods, which means joined limb. So arthropods are beetles that have the exoskeleton. So a lot of them will have these kind of gangly little limbs. So they're kind of standing up on their little beetle legs. They're weird looking sculptures, but they're very musical. There's a lot of fascinating things if you get to see them close up.
What an imagination he had. Just tremendous.
Yeah.
And we're getting into a couple more of the playful ones that he has here. Not all of it was, as heavy.
Yes.
And this one actually, to me, looks like a young boy, with drumsticks.
Yes. Well, yeah. So one of the things that he did with this Burgess Shale series is he only actually did one piece that was a copy, so to speak, of an actual fossil. Okay. The rest of them he took pieces and remixed them in creative ways. So they're all, pieces of different animals or different fossils remixed. So there will be, some of them will have antennae, tentacles, some of them will have bone, and he'll kind of artistically use them to his profit to make his own creatures of the Burgess Shale. But he did do one, just to market, he did do one that was actually a replica of one of the most common species there, and it's the last sculpture he did in that series.
And that other playful one looks like the game of jacks.
Yes.
That we played as kids too. That's a really whimsical one as well.
Well, again, that one and the last one are really, the pieces in Series 5 that refer to this sort of sense of joy, which is, or not a common theme for his work, but a very common theme for art. I mean, pleasure and joy is definitely what most art is about. He was, I would say, more of an existentialist. So he looked at, what are the existential realities that art needs to address. Certainly joy is there. It doesn't need any help, I guess, in his estimation, but it was something that he probably needed to do after that very heavy series. But again, that was the series that he thought of as his little Brandenburg concertos.
Okay.
So,
again, the music correlation
absolutely,
all throughout this.
Absolutely. And he would consider those visual representations of music. So they're music in his eyes.
I love this archway that he also has, and that goes toward him forging these squares and spheres here for this incredible archway.
Well,
That's
yes.
something.
So this is a piece number 5 in series 1. So the first series that he did when he got to Hornby Island. Of course, he had a bit of a career before he got to Hornby Island and did a bunch of shows elsewhere. But when he got to Hornby and purchased the land in the early 70s, there was a bit of a hiatus. And when he got back to working, series 1 was his attempt to create this 3-dimensional language for sculpture that would be akin to music. So all of those cubes and cuboids are actually multiples of each other, and they're all very much proportional. So they kind of interact as you walk around them. The archway itself is meant to be seen inside it, so you can actually walk through the sculpture. You can look, and it frames the sky in really fun ways. But it is one of my favorite pieces. You picked a good one.
It sounds like visiting there is a very immersive experience, like all your senses are fired. It must be really interesting on a windy or rainy day to walk amongst these sculptures. Like the sound must be quite magical.
It is. There's a lot of flowing creeks. There's a lot of water. So one of them, there's birds and water is what you hear a lot when you're out there. Little creeks burbling. A lot of eagles and hawks and things that are flying around. But yes, it is very immersive. It's a bit of effort to move around, so your body is working. So there's a lot of senses that you're getting. One of the things that's different about sculpture, especially this sculpture, it doesn't refer to something else. It's not a painting that refers to another idea. These are real objects in an environment. They're not anywhere else. They're right there. And so you're encountering them as individuals existing in real time.
Beautiful. I think Jeffrey would be very, very pleased with how you, as the curator and manager, are taking this park forward. And you've got some very interesting events at Karun. Concerts, workshops. Tell us a bit about how the park is used.
Sure. Well, one of the primary functions of the park is to promote and strengthen the concept that art is a source of knowledge. Jeffrey felt really strongly that art should be viewed as a source of knowledge. Of course, it's a source of pleasure, but so we have a lot of events to help promote that. And one of the major ones is coming up. It's our Company of Ideas Forum, which is a 3-day conference. Last year, the theme was art and music. This year, it's art and artificial intelligence. And that's going to be live streamed. But we also have events in the summer in the park. The park's open on scheduled days, and we have string quartet concerts. This year we have a lovely violin and piano duo, and we have some modern sound art. So sound artists that come do soundscapes within the park that are specifically tailored to individual sculptures. So you're not hearing music so much as paintings with sounds. They could be sounds that they generate or sounds that they've made by rubbing the sculpture or banging the sculpture, sounds that they've taken out of the environment, and they've made a sort of soundscape for you to listen to while you're in the park.
That is so unique. How incredible. I've never been to a sound art event.
Well, there's a whole movement of it. I didn't realize. So there's a whole movement of this. Sort of new type of experience and experimentation.
And it's free. All
Absolutely.
of this is free, which is what Jeffrey wanted, didn't he?
It was very, very direct, and he was absolutely adamant that the space was a non-commodified space. He didn't want there to be a barrier to anybody participating, and he didn't want it to be even about that. You're there to experience art. It's a gift, and whether or not you have the ability to pay is irrelevant.
Fantastic. And you're funded through donations, through, before we get into that, he also has scholarships and bursaries for Cambridge and UVic and other universities.
We have four, so we have a PhD student scholarship at the University of Victoria that's administered by them through an endowment. They also give out bursaries every year to various students, mainly international students. So we've got a cohort of probably 10 bursary recipients, some of whom came up and visited the park, and that's at UVic, and we're working with them. Yes, Cambridge University, Churchill College at Cambridge University in the UK, we have a special relationship with them, and they get a junior researcher, so that's a postdoctorate. And then the park offers a postdoctorate award as well for art research and art as a source of knowledge. And oftentimes they'll participate in our book series. So we try to do publications on art as a source of knowledge. We just published a book with Manchester University Press on that subject. And we have educators awards. So if any educator in BC wants to come to the park, we can help with offsetting some of the costs of travel to get to the park to develop lesson plans. We have lesson plans. And we can also help with some of the ferry costs if you need to come to the park with your group. So there's that. We also do an award for an artist wanting to make a creative work that's inspired by the park or by Jeffrey's work.
Karun, this is just so amazing. The depth and the richness of the activities and the art and the spirit that you're fostering all of this in. It's just such a joy to learn about this, and I can't wait to visit in person.
Well, we can't wait to have you.
Yeah.
Please come up.
Before we wrap, any closing thoughts? What do you think Jeffrey would think of, because you knew him personally?
Yeah, I think that he would definitely be happy with what we're doing. I think he's happy we're doing it now, and that he doesn't have to have all of the people and the buzz around him. He was quite a shy person in some senses, but in other senses, once he got him talking, he was extremely vocal about his opinions, and I think that he's probably looking down and is quite pleased with all the activity and excitement, especially the young people. He was a really, really big promoter of young people, and we would always have young people at our conferences. And so, if you're a young person that's excited about the arts, please come up and see where and how deep the arts could take you.
Thank you so much, Karun. This has been such a joy. And unfortunately, we've got to wrap up here, but I will come up, and I hope our viewers will also come up to the Jeffrey Rubinoff Sculpture Park on Hornby Island. Steel yourself for a really amazing experience with nature and with art. Thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time here on Coast Connections.